Dog's never late, Matrix. Or Matrix. How are you? Hey guys, how are we tonight? What, 30 seconds late? Hey Smiley, how are you? Happy Thursday, everyone, as another week passes us by. Weekend is almost here. Hey Pussycat, how are you? Red Eye Jedi's here. Good evening. Hey Jamie. So just as we're waiting for people to roll in here, I'm just gonna show a clip of the verdict from the Jennifer Crumbley trial. I don't know how many of you guys have been following it. I've not really followed this myself. I've seen maybe 1 or 2 days, but this was quite surprising. Here was the verdict a couple of days ago.
On count one of involuntary manslaughter as to Madison Baldwin, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter. On count two of involuntary manslaughter in regards to Tate Muir, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter. On count three, as to involuntary manslaughter regarding Hannah St. Juliana, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter. And in count four of involuntary manslaughter against Justin Schilling, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
Thank you for allowing me to see it.
So what do people think of the verdict? I know her face, yeah. I was quite surprised to see this from Long Crime, this phrase, Mom of Oxford school shooter lacks emotion after guilty verdict. I don't know how you can I don't know how you can say that. I mean, she looked pretty emotional to me. Because she didn't fall on the floor, I guess, right? She lacks emotion, apparently. I don't really have much of an opinion on this, but it's interesting because, as far as I know, it's the first time the parents of a school shooter have been prosecuted, right? As far as I'm aware. So it's obviously quite precedent setting. I don't even know 3 cents. Does anyone know? Has she been sentenced yet? What is she facing? Jenny has been working hard. Yeah, same Helen. What I did watch was pretty interesting though. Her attorney that you can see there was quite a character. She was pretty passionate. And you can see just how gutted she is at the verdict there when it's read out.
On count one of involuntary manslaughter as to Madison Baldwin, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter. On count two of involuntary manslaughter in regards to Tate Muir, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter. On count three, as to involuntary manslaughter regarding Hannah St. Juliana, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter. And in count four of involuntary manslaughter against Justin Schilling, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
Thank you for allowing me to see it.
Yeah, that's just a dumb phrase from Long Crime. Jenny says, Rabbit, she didn't want to stand up, so she was really nervous and weak. Yeah, she looked emotional to me. April sentence, I believe, 15 years. Pussycat says 4 to 9. Someone else says 15 years as well. Kids and guns don't mix, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, from the little I know, clearly their eyes were majorly off the ball. There was definite red flags there, right? But I don't have an opinion on the verdict. I don't know enough about the case. Yeah, Suzanne. It's definitely worth looking into, though. The trial looked interesting. Helen says, question, is she guilty for allowing her son access to a weapon or enabling access, or is she guilty because she knew what he was doing? Well, she's been found culpable of some sort of involuntary manslaughter because there was enough red flags that she should have been aware of as a parent to have prevented it. The son's in prison. The son was convicted last year, I think. Did you not? I thought she looked pretty emotional, 3 cents. But who knows? So back to the Adelsons, guys. So I've written up a handy timeline of that day. I think it's handy to have it there, because this is the closest thing to a smoking gun we know of in terms of Wendy's guilt here. The actual timeline. Helen says, God, that's a really hard one to determine. Sometimes these things just cannot be prevented. Yeah, in most cases, I would say, but I think there was definite things that should have been done by the parents here. I'm not saying that she should have been found guilty. I just don't know enough. This was Michigan, right? So, last time we watched the testimony of both Wendy and Jeffrey Lacasse, like, that you can see on screen here, during the very first trial, which was of Katie McBanawa and Sigfrido Garcia in 2019, the very first trial, where Garcia was found guilty and Katie um, had a hung jury. So there was a retrial where she was convicted. And I was planning on going through each trial sequentially and showing the contrast of both their testimonies, one after the other. But I think it's worth pausing and watching the interview of one of Dan's closest and longest friends, Tamaro Demco, on the bottom left here. I rewatched this yesterday actually, and it is just as insightful and valuable, I think, as Jeffrey's interview. Actually crucial to attempting to understand Wendy, attempting to understand, is there any chance whatsoever that her crazy family did this without her knowledge? That's obviously beyond doubt that her family ordered the murder of her ex-husband Dan. I'm convinced Wendy had knowledge, but for the sake of being as objective as possible, we can't forgo that possibly entirely, can we? Jamie saying that the kid had more red flags than China. Yeah. Yeah. An important trial, though, right? It's going to have all sorts of repercussions. I believe the father is still to be tried. So just before we begin watching this, I just wanted to say a few things about objectivity and perhaps uncomfortable observations or uncomfortable analysis in true crime, which happens in general. I don't know if you guys agree, but in true crime coverage, hey Muzerman, in true crime coverage in general, things tend to be polarized in terms of either advocacy or controversy. You very rarely come across true crime which is not one or the other, right? A true crime creator trying to create drama in true crime, or a true crimer who's advocating at all costs for most likely the victims, right? And I only care about the truth in a case. I'm sure every true crimer says that, but it's the case here. And if you, now I'm analysing this case as I go along. I've not seen all the footage of this yet. A lot of the footage I'm watching for the first time as I'm playing it here with you guys, right? So I'm kind of going along the journey with some of you guys in here and some of you guys that will be watching this back. And I did hint earlier on when I was covering this that there is every chance that as despicable as Wendy is, did she have some legitimate reasons to feel partly a victim of Dan? And this is where it gets into the uncomfortable part, right? Because it can't be ignored that at the beginning of Jeff's interview, he does relate that he had met Dan a few times and he knew people that knew Dan. Not everything that that Jeff was relating about Dan came directly from Wendy. And he did paint a pretty negative picture of Dan. Now, of course, I'm not dumb enough to ignore the fact that his perception would have been manipulated hugely through Wendy. That's obvious. But you also cannot ignore that a lot of his analysis on Dan came from his own experience of Dan. And you're going to hear a little hint of this as well from Tamaro Demco, which corroborates a little bit of what Jeff is saying. And if you're interested in the truth in a case, then you're interested in the truth or you're not. So I'm just tabling that, I'm just putting that there. The obvious disclaimer that shouldn't have to be made is that no one ever deserves to die, okay? I agree, Helen, yeah. Yeah, but you're going to hear part of what Jeff was relating, corroborated by Tamara a bit. But it's interesting because as I'm noticing some uncomfortable truths in relation to Dan, I'm also noticing even more red flags and good evidence of Wendy's guilt. Simultaneously, it's interesting. One thing that cannot be denied is how toxic their relationship was. And how toxic the legal proceedings were from both sides. But you guys can decide for yourselves what you think. So I've got Tamaro Demco's interview for us to watch here, guys. Jamie, you're right. Yeah, Wendy was definitely not in love when they married. This you will hear this coming from Tamara. This was part of the problem because you will hear Tamara corroborates a lot of what we've had hinted at. That Dan was devastated by the breakup. He basically begged to do anything to stay together. And Wendy just did not love him. And you cannot force yourself to love someone. But clearly, it became something more than just toxic. The vengeance and hatred was just indescribable. One of the only questions that remains is there any possibility that this crazy family would do this without Wendy say so?
Law school, you met Danny at Harvard Law School. You were elected to posts for leadership purposes, and you've kept in touch with him throughout this time.
Yes.
And you're going to notice just how smart this woman is and how well she communicates and how, just like Jeff, how easy it is to believe everything she's saying. It's always a lot easier when it's a witness rather than an actual suspect, obviously, but you can still determine this. And she was so observant of the dynamics, and she was not only a long time very close friend to Dan, but she became really close to Wendy as well. And you're going to notice some real similarities in terms of what she noticed and how Wendy treated her as to how Wendy treated Jeff. There's a pattern, there's corroboration.
All right, I'll let you, just wanted to make sure I'm
And yeah, this is one day after the murder, guys. One day.
up to speed on where we're at, and that you has been in Tallahassee, what did you say, 12 years?
7.
7, I'm sorry. And did you go to their wedding?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I was hanging out with them up here before the wedding, but I didn't actually go to their wedding.
Oh, the wedding wasn't here? Okay. Go ahead, feel free.
Danny, so Wendy was going through this process, and the time before she left him, she finished writing her book. And I noticed when she gave me a copy of the book before she left him that she didn't put that she was married. She like listed her kids, but she didn't. And I kind of was like, interesting.
She didn't list Danny?
No, not to my recollection. There was something that stood out about her dedication to me, or like the author lives here with her 2 sons.
Okay.
And so that was a little odd. But again, this was a few years ago at this point. It was 2012. So 2012, I'd started a doctoral program at UNC Chapel Hill, and I was traveling with the class to London, and I happened to fly back through Toronto, and since Danny's family has a place in Toronto, Wendy had sent out a birthday invitation to all of Danny's friends and said, hey, for Danny's 40th, can you all make a video? Take a picture of yourself doing something, wishing Danny happy birthday. And she sent this out months earlier, like everything was fine between them. So I took a little video of myself in Toronto, and that never happened. The party never happened. Right around his birthday, she called me up, and I knew Danny was traveling, and she said, I have left him. And she moved everything out of the house, and she left him. What I didn't know at the time is that she hadn't told him where she was going. And she kept this from him for a couple of weeks, like he was going crazy. He was heartbroken. I was trying to be friendly with her. I didn't know what to think about what she'd said, that he was kind of being psychologically abusive. He's older than she is, so I think she felt that as a power play based on what she'd said to me. And I was in a position where I felt inclined to try to believe her. So she went and she got her place on Aqua Ridge, and I went and visited her just to see if she's okay. I took my boys over there, see her settle in, not knowing that she was keeping the location at the time.
Not knowing what?
That she had been keeping the location from Danny
Okay.
at the time.
Okay.
She didn't handle it well at all. Like it was probably the nastiest divorce I've ever seen. It was nasty. Danny went into this deep depression, and we spent a lot of time. Eventually, I talked to him. He told me, he's like, I don't understand. I'll be better. I'll be a better husband. I won't nag her so much about cooking or cleaning, and he just kept beating himself up about it for a long time. We had a lot of very personal, intimate discussions over the course of a year, I guess.
You and Danny?
And Danny, yeah. And I was talking to Wendy, but Danny kept claiming that Wendy was a little unstable and that she was very flaky. And I was kind of but she ended up being like that, in that she would make plans and she'd cancel them suddenly, or she'd forget about them, and she'd do that with friends as well. But it became a hard line. They would call it, you're either Team Danny or Team Wendy.
Yeah.
And they would actively refer to this. Danny
People that are associated with all.
And Danny himself and Wendy herself. They would say Team Danny and Team Wendy.
Okay.
It was kind of unnerving, actually. And I was like, I don't want to pick a team. I've become friends with her, too.
Just to say, guys, for anyone that's watching that isn't up on all the details of the case, if you have any questions, fire them in chat, and I'll do my best to try and answer them. He
was a wreck, and she didn't want to live in Tallahassee. She hated being here. She was a more of a DC girl or Miami, and I found out over time that she actually grew up several blocks over from me in Coral Springs, which is where I moved to when I was 12. She was a few years younger, so I never really met her in high school or anything like that. But her parents still lived there at the time. I think they've since relocated, I don't know. But I went and met her family there. When they were married, I saw them both there when they were first having their babies and such, and so I'd go and visit them, whether it was here or whether it was down there. When she left, it was a family effort. Like, parents came up, helped her move, helped conceal everything, get that going. Danny was like beside himself. When she didn't want to move, when she wanted to move, he tried to make it so that she couldn't. And this began a really ugly portion of the legal battle.
Move where?
She wanted to move back to South Florida to be closer to her parents.
After the divorce?
Yes.
Okay.
And he said, I love my kids too much, knowing how I'm going to fight you. And he was able to get an injunction so she couldn't move. So she was stuck here. She was also under consideration for a professor track at FSU College of Law. And starting at some point, I don't even remember when, it's been 3 years or so, I guest lecture for her in her class every semester. I just did a few.
So 3 cents says, question, I don't understand all that circus around Wendy's alibi with the TV. She was supposed to spend the whole week, including the 18th, with Jeff somewhere away, a perfect alibi. Why bother with the TV? Yeah, it's a good question. Superficially, it's a ridiculous alibi, but it's undoubtedly a code word. We know that because of what came out after the bump through the conversations between Donna and Charlie. They were referring to the TV again in relation to the problem, the TV. We know that Wendy went out of her way to make Jeff aware that the TV was broken for some bizarre reason. And then we have Donna setting up Best Buy to come and repair the TV on that morning. And if you have a look here at the text message from Donna, it's very suspicious in retrospect, this text message, with everything we know. Best Buy just called me, but I told them to confirm with you they are on their way over now to help you with the TV sets in your living room. It's not that her having to be at home for the TV is the greatest alibi in the world. It perhaps evolved. But reading that sentence back in retrospect, it's easy to read that as a coded message, right? The hitmen are on their way to take care of your problem. Then she texts Charlie, this is so sweet. She even tells the Best Buy agent the joke about Charlie getting the TV because it was cheaper than a hitman. But you're right, it's not very logical, right? Hey, K Buns. Because you're right, her and Jeff were supposed to go down to California, I think, to visit Jeff's family, I believe. It was arranged. I think Jeff had bought the ticket. He says that Wendy told him that she had bought the ticket, but he believes that she didn't. And he relates that for some reason she was all of a sudden very against this holiday. Like she had to be here. She had to be in Tallahassee for the 18th. Yeah, Suzanne? Helen says she knew, I'm convinced. The screen was cracked, couldn't be fixed. Definitely an alibi. Because that's the other thing about the screen being cracked. Jeff says there's no way the kids broke the television like Wendy was telling him. He said it looked like it had been punched or hit by a baseball bat. Trying to logically explain, however, why After calling Dan back when she knew he was most likely shot by this point, which was at 11:42. So she called Dan back 3 hours after Dan called her. She let it go to voicemail and listened to the voicemail pretty quickly, from what I gather, but didn't call him back until 3 hours later, which was an hour after he was murdered. But trying to rationally explain why she then drove down Trescott Drive, if you're hypothetically want to assume that she had no knowledge of the hit, is pretty difficult. But yeah, it's a good question. Wendy is a wolf in sheep's clothing. 100%.
2 weeks ago, which I'll come back to. Please remind me to come back to that because she said some things to me.
Okay.
The legal battle was very ugly. She felt trapped. I started trying to not talk to both of them about the legal stuff because I felt kind of caught in the middle. And she thought there's no way they can force me to stay here. And he's like, there's no way I'm not going to have access to my kids. She was getting a hefty sum of money from him. There were some things that he was, even last month, was upset about. She had his uncle's ring, something along those lines, that she had taken, and it was like a family heirloom that she wouldn't give back. And she had taken whatever she took.
Whoops. Yeah, Suzanne, I'm just rereading your comment there. I see what you mean now. Why did Donna explain why the TV repairmen were coming, right? In the text message. Yeah, good point. Why did she have to explain it? It was kind of implicit, wasn't it? Okay, let me get back to where I was at. There we go. So that was FSU School of Law that you could see there in Florida, in Tallahassee.
Weeks ago, which I'll come back to. Please remind me to come back to that because she said some things to me.
Okay.
Jamie says that phone call, the one at 11:42, was to see if the deed was done. Then she drove there, either to notify Charlie to pay the hitman or wanted to see the scene. Yeah. There's no other rational explanation, or just morbid curiosity. But there's strong indication that Katie seemed to have known that the deed was done prior to being called by the hitmen to confirm it. And that could only have come from Charlie via Wendy, right? It's the only way. And this is based on the testimony of Rivera. Red Eye says, yes, Ms. or Mom, she started the ball rolling, in my opinion, with something known in psychology as the smear campaign. Basically, slagging off Dan until everyone else was pissed off enough to put the hit out. Well, God. That's a hell of a consequence from a smear campaign. I think, let me just say this, I agree with what Jamie said earlier. I think the idea has to have come from Donna. Has to have come from Donna. I don't think Wendy came up with this idea to murder Dan. I think at the very minimum, she required a lot of persuading. There's a lot of indication from Jeff's testimony, who was with Wendy more than anyone in the months leading up to this, that she was in turmoil, emotional turmoil. She may be a wolf in sheep's clothing and a hideous person, but there's most likely some humanity in her where it couldn't have been easy for her, I guess. But almost definitely she decided to go with it. And then as the legal proceedings escalated, and she heard that she was about to be in huge trouble with this legal bomb that Dan was about to drop on her. It may just have pushed her over the edge. And don't forget, Charlie had tried to arrange the hit a year earlier. Wendy herself told Jeff about this. And this is on top of the TV hitman joke. On top of that, she told Jeff seriously that Charlie had tried to arrange to have him murdered a year earlier. It wasn't a joke. Red Eye says, no, killing Dan wasn't Wendy's idea, but I bet she didn't object once the idea was raised. I'm not so sure. I see her maybe taking a bit of convincing. Going through some of the email messages coming from Donna to Wendy that we've seen through Charlie's trial, you can see that there's hints that Wendy is not on board with all of Donna's suggestions vis-a-vis the court proceedings and the relocation attempt and the ideas that Donna was coming up with to try and provoke Dan and to try and bribe him. So if she wasn't fully on board with that, it stands to reason that murdering him would be a step further, right? But did she know in advance about the hit? Almost definitely, yeah. It's with everything we know, we have to say it would be astonishing if she didn't, with all her actions, even just her actions on the day.
The legal battle was very ugly. She felt trapped. I started trying to not talk to both of them about the legal stuff because I felt kind of caught in the middle. And she thought, there's no way they can force me to stay here. And he's like, there's no way I'm not going to have access to my kids. She was getting a hefty sum of money from him. There were some things that he was, even last month, was upset about. She had his uncle's ring, something along those lines.
Any evidence of Jupiter's delight anywhere in this case by any chance, Red Eye? Yeah, well, we have the evidence of the celebration dinner that took place weeks after the murder, which was referred to by Jeff, where Wendy apparently threw up at dinner after something Charlie said. I'm sure we can conjure up and imagine what Charlie might have said at dinner to cause her to vomit.
That she had taken, and it was like a family heirloom that she wouldn't give back. And she had taken whatever she wanted out of the house at the time.
She was out of town. Is that what I understood?
So he had to refurnish, and he's like, I spent $10,000 refurnishing this place, and it was a big adjustment, and he didn't know what he had done wrong. Having talked to Wendy, there was nothing he could do right. And she just didn't love him.
Okay.
And it was not something I could say to him. Over time, I've tried to get there, but she just didn't love him that way. And I think she was young, and he was a scholar and the type of guy that her parents would want, and I think.
Great point, Jamie. I had to repeat that line there the last time. They're not going to arrest me, she said with that Jupiter's delight glee on her face. You're right. That was at the first trial. That was in 2019.
She even knew as she was getting married that it wasn't right.
That's what you referred to earlier about her having cold feet.
Yes. She had cold feet. We went for a walk within a month before her wedding, and we went to McClay and walked around. And she's just like, I don't know if I can marry.
Don't marry for money, guys. Don't marry for money. Unless you've got a damn better plan than Wendy did.
Marry him. And I was like, well, if you don't know, then you shouldn't. And still did. So I think the kids kept them occupied for a little while.
Well, I'm trying to think that they were married in 2006, I believe.
Mm-hmm, sounds right.
And they didn't have children right away.
No.
Go, Helen.
No. She had been like July 2009, and then Lincoln came a couple years after. So more recently, he had dated a couple people here and there. He was just trying to get his legs under him again. He would often go to Maya and Alex Greenberg's house. They were sort of his surrogate family to get him through this time. And I'd pop over and we'd have drinks and talk, and we'd have these long discussions about lots of different things.
Are they attorneys also?
No, they said today that they weren't. Maya is a dentist. I don't know what Alex does.
Okay.
But I had met them over the course of time.
In Georgia?
They were in Georgia, but I'd met them in Tallahassee.
Okay.
And I'd met them at some Jewish thingy. But I often would meet him at Jewish festivals and things like that. We'd get our kids together at the park just down the street from his house. And we'd often go to dinner, just talk. He started dating Amy, and we'd still go out. And he always, he'd be like flirting with her and talking to me, and then he'd try to tease her, and he'd turn around and he'd be like, "Hey, FaceTime," and he'd show me, Amy on FaceTime. And Wendy was just kind of absent. I don't know if she figured I became Team Danny in her mind, but she still would call me up just randomly and say, "Hey, can you guest lecture for me now?" And sure. She had gotten kind of flaky. And over time, I think Danny was able to tell people in a way that they started seeing that she was acting inconsistent. And so I think she felt that. Recently, they kept changing attorneys over and over and over again. And I'll at some point pull up a list because we had a conversation that's still on my Facebook messages about attorneys because I was looking for one. I have since worked things out with my ex, but just verbally. But at the time I was looking for one, so he was telling me who was good and who he had. But they were constantly switching. So he was blocking the attorneys that she had. She was blocking the attorneys that he had because...
Red Eye says, I wouldn't be surprised if she trapped him by getting pregnant. I bet he was about to leave her before she fell too. Well, all I know is that he was devastated when she separated with him. But I can see why you would imagine that. She was very conniving, is Wendy.
Because there was some conflict of interest, and it was spiraling to the point where it was like, was there anyone that could represent either of them in town?
Okay, you mean post-divorce litigation?
Post-divorce litigation, even a couple months ago. So he took me out for my birthday last month. My birthday is June 3rd. He took me out June 4th. We went out for Thai food. And, he told me that he was really infatuated with Amy and that, he's the only dad I've ever met who would go to his kids' preschool daily just to have snack with them. I mean, he loved them that much. But he was telling me that it was getting really ugly again and that he was going to kind of go to the mattresses with her. And there was a bunch of weird. They're just things that don't feel right to me. And that's why I'm really glad that you have me come in, having me come in today. So after my birthday, we still talked on the phone, I believe, but I didn't physically see him afterward, I don't think. Wendy, I guess, lectured for after my birthday, so after that. And I talked to her, and she told me that she was dating someone. And I said, oh, and I thought it was new. It wasn't new. She'd been dating this guy since September. Social worker. He was a professor in social work at FSU. And she was all excited about him, and, you know, he wants to get serious, and she's not sure, but she really likes him, and everything's good, and maybe we should double date sometime, because I had started dating someone in the interim. So, you know, Danny and I were both talking about the current people we were dating. I'm like, oh, you know, we'll see how it works out. But he wanted to get a movie afterwards. I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't. We'll do it next time. It's never next time. So he had started consulting, and I didn't know much about what he was doing. He was kind of excited about it. I knew he wasn't the lead. And I don't think he felt it was dangerous. When I found out, and I guess this is going backwards so I can understand my thought process on it too, because it's more instinctive right now and that's bothering me. I found out, I was at work at Text Watch when this happened. I had no idea it happened. It pains me that I was like down the road when this happened. I found it because a law school classmate sent me an email and said, I just saw, oh my God, are you okay? Because my entire class knows that we're close. And that's how I found out. And I was not doing well with it. And I got upset for the first hour. I called John Beeman and said, what the hell happened? You know, he couldn't tell me much, but there was a suggestion that maybe it was a known entity. And before we even got to him saying that, I was thinking about the relationship with Wendy, and it just didn't feel good. Did not feel good. And got off the phone with him, and I found Amy's number, and I talked to Amy for a long time. And I talked to his other friends, Maya and Alex, and then I felt like, and so Amy said to me, if someone intentionally killed Danny, if I go down there, what if they try to hurt me? Because she was feeling like something was off too. And I said, well, I have a concealed carry, you know, I'll take it with me, just come, you can stay at my place, I'll pick you up. So I got off the phone with her, and I realized I didn't have my clip. I haven't found my clip for like 2 months. I have no idea where it went. Yeah. So I went to Kevin's, and it was like I have like a cheap Kel-Tec 9 and like a novice. I only got it after the other stuff. So I went to Kevin's. They didn't have those clips. They're going to order them for me. But I ended up buying one yesterday. I bought a 40 yesterday. And I went and just am like, okay, I get that for tomorrow in case she needs protection or whatever. And
okay, this part here is very interesting. She's about to relate to when Tamaro went to visit Wendy. Wendy didn't contact Tamara, even though they were very close friends, even though Tamara had just been substituting for her at the uni. But Tamara took it upon herself to go and visit, and she has some very interesting things to say because Wendy had a friend there who was acting as a kind of guardian, and Wendy's parents were there. And listen to what she says about the parents, and especially about Harvey, because I know we've not spoken on much about Harvey. Harvey, Wendy's father, who is, per the prosecution, also an unindicted conspirator.
At that point, I couldn't help myself. I'm like, I have noon. And I drove straight to Wendy's. And when I got there, it didn't make me feel better. And I hate saying it, but I do, because I feel disloyal somehow. But I got there, she had her friend Janine, who I hadn't really heard about before, and Janine's husband, I guess. I can't remember his name. Something short and interesting. But she opened the door, and she looked fairly calm. And she hugged me. I didn't say a word. And she just said, "I'm so sorry," to me, because she knows how close we were. And then it was odd, because it felt like Janine was playing bodyguard and being very, and like, who's this Janine person? Her mom came out, I hugged her mom. The boys were running around like nothing's going wrong. And I was so glad, I just had to see them. Like, I wanted to be near some part of Danny. And I asked the mom, like, how did you find out? She said, we're in Miami. Wendy called from the police station. We drove all night. And she seemed appropriately, like, upset. Then her dad, who I've met half a dozen times, Coral Springs, up here, he gave me this look, and I don't know what my facial reaction was to it, but I'm almost positive it was one of suspicion and anger, because he can't even look me in the face today. And it was awkward, and it never had been before. That really bothered me.
Was it common for him to look you in the face? I mean, some people don't do it.
No, not like an Asperger's kid. No, he was, yeah, absolutely. You know, at least when someone's talking, generally you're listening and looking. No, it was odd.
He recognized you. There
Of
wasn't a
course,
question
he's like,
of that.
TJ, hey. Yeah.
But he would not look you in the eye.
He started off fine. And then when we locked eyes, it was like something transpired that didn't sit well with either one of us, I guess. And then today he would not even look at me. I found that to be very unsettling.
And this would be Wendy's father.
Yes.
Harvey?
Mm-hmm. Harvey. Charlie was supposed to come up, her younger brother, but he didn't. That was also strange, because she was positive he was coming and then he wasn't. I drove then to his house, to Danny's house, and sat outside and prayed.
From Wendy's?
From Wendy's.
And this was yesterday?
This was yesterday.
Okay.
And just sat there and prayed and said, from here, nothing looks different. It looks like he'll be home any moment. And then went to church and prayed for an hour, ran into my priest, talked to him for another hour, and I haven't slept since. So, I didn't know where he had been shot until this morning. It was extremely hard to hear.
Who told you?
Maya.
What'd she tell you?
She said that he was shot in the face, and that the only thing visible was his chin, and that his brain was mostly gone. And then there were all sorts of rumors swirling.
But that's not true. I mean, I don't know where that's coming from. That's not completely accurate.
Okay.
I'm sorry to have to, I mean...
No, just...
But I don't know. I can't correct that, what has been already told to you specifically, but unfortunately these things get all blown out of proportion.
Yeah. Let me continue talking.
Yeah,
and
go ahead.
feel like
I'm
we're
sorry.
done. Like,
I'm
you
sorry.
can tell me what you're able to tell me,
Go ahead.
and I would love to hear it. I don't think that any one of them physically pulled the trigger. I think it is extremely odd that Janine all of a sudden is tagging on. I found it extremely odd that Wendy's boyfriend that she was so excited about a few weeks ago was not there. When I was leaving, I said, well, where's your new guy? Shouldn't he be here to come for you?
She is corroborating all the impressions that Jeff gave. This is so interesting and damning, and her relating to her experience of, you know, Harvey not being able to look her in the eye. These are things that are very hard to really, you know, um, hang on someone in court, I guess, but it all adds up. And people, as she said herself, she had met Wendy's parents a good few times before. She knew them. She knew how they reacted to things. And people in general are very skilled at picking up with their gut when things are off. And as she's been relating so well through this interview, and bear in mind how upset she clearly is, right? This is a day after. And she's still able to articulate it so well. And it has the quintessential ring of truth about it. It corroborates what Jeff has to say. It corroborates all the red flags that we know of, the more factual red flags, you know, text messages and Wendy's movements and behavior. I really hope that she's called to testify in future, especially if Wendy ends up in court.
And she's like, there's no new guy. And I was like, that's interesting timing. There's just a lot of interesting timings that don't feel right here. And and Wendy's gone through a lot. She's gone through a lot with this. So it could just be that she's grieving, and I hope that that's the case. But I wouldn't put it past her father or even her brother to do something that she might not even be aware of.
You talking about this Charlie?
Charlie, maybe. Charlie really cares about her and hated Danny for stuff.
So Tamara asks the question herself, is it possible that this horrific family did this behind Wendy's back? So the only real question that remains.
But her dad, I mean, there was a lot of animosity. I don't know whether she told them that he had been abusive or what. I don't know. But I hope that's not the case. I just, everything I've heard does not feel random at all to me. And it feels incredibly intentional based on talking to Amy. She talked to him the night before, and he usually sleeps in bed with the kids. And there were nights when I would go over and we'd sing lullabies to the kids to put them to sleep. And he dropped them off at Creative, and Amy figured he was coming or going from the gym because that was the routine. But it sounds like someone knew the routine.
Going from the creative preschool to the gym to home?
I don't know which order that was. I don't know.
He had the kids the night before?
He had the kids the night before, according to Amy.
Okay.
And the last time they texted was something like 12:30. One of them said that they were going to be, tired, going to sleep. I think she said she was tired and she was going to sleep. And they didn't, they didn't talk that morning.
Okay.
And then she couldn't get a hold of him for the rest of the day, obviously. He was finally feeling happy again. He was feeling hopeful. Things with his kids were great. Wendy was this huge elephant in his life for him. I mean, it was consuming. Not that he was obsessed about it, it just he wanted it to end. And it just seemed like it was never going to end. The latest claim was that she had concealed $500,000 in assets, on top of having the family heirloom and other things that he felt were unreasonable. And
So as Tamara says, this is what was coming in this legal bomb, that Dan was going to accuse her of concealing $500,000. and we know about the family heirloom that she stole.
He had claimed to Maya and to Alex, apparently, that there was something that big that he was going to drop a bomb on her in the next week. A legal bomb that would discredit her statements, particularly with regard to financial matters. Again, the timing of all of it doesn't sit well with me. Wendy's family's reactions to things, because I've been around them, and even when she first left him, I mean, I went over to her house, her parents.
So, 3 Cents is asking, does anyone know what Wendy is doing now? Is she a stay-at-home unconvicted murderer? Is she working? Has anyone got the guts to hire her? Well, I've got one of her CVs here, curriculum vitae, and there's basically nothing that Wendy hasn't done in life. It's you would think that she should be, capable of running for president. Um, Everything is about presentation with Wendy. According to what she said in the recent trial in 2023, she is an attorney. I don't think she said whether she was practicing or not. I'm sure she's working. I'm sure she is. I just don't know what. If anyone knows, throw it in chat.
Staying there, I had a drink with her mom. Like, I've seen them and how they react to things. And
yeah, she moved down to
and
Miami
it could just be, I hope
3
it
days
is.
after the
Because
murder.
I don't want Ben and Lincoln to grow up with, really orphaned. And if it does have to do with that family, I hope Wendy had nothing to do with it and is triply devastated that something was related. But I don't know. I don't know about the consulting. Maybe there was some risk.
Jamie, you're so awesome with the info. A lawyer friend of her folks hired her. She has a boyfriend named George, older and rich. There you go, folks. It's so what we would predict, right? Go Wendy. Onwards and upwards. Thing is, thinking about in the event that she was to escape conviction. Now, I guess this only applies if she gives a shit, but it is the case that anytime her name is ever mentioned in the media, it's always going to be in reference to the suspicion of having killed her ex-husband. And anyone that ever meets her in any walk of life is going to know that there's this suspicion hanging over her, regardless of what they say. It's something she will never, ever escape. It just depends whether she gives a shit about that or not. Who knows? But I guess, in a sense, at least there's that. She will forever be known as being behind the murder to most people, to the public.
But my understanding was that he was not lead, which shouldn't have made him a target like that. It was fairly recent, and it seems like it would take some time for someone to establish his patterns. It just seems known. The outpouring of messages I've gotten from his students, from my classmates, from my friends, is all past and present. He was a great criminal professor. Students liked him. I don't think it was some strung out student who didn't like their grade. That doesn't feel right to me either. If it was some weird tangential thing related to consulting, I suppose that's from a possibility, but that still doesn't feel quite right. It just feels very personal. It feels very personal. And I want to give benefit of the doubt, but on some gut level, I have this anger that's there. And
I suspect you're correct, Jamie. Yep.
he didn't deserve this. But, no, there was never, it wasn't just that she was treating him poorly, like in a typical situation. There's strangeness about it, either because she was changing stories or she was being incredibly evasive, and it really bothered him. But I tried to not let it bother my friendship with her. I tried to keep them separated, which is not.
Yeah, someone mentioned earlier as well, you know, it's strange that they don't have any wiretaps from Wendy. They have to have been wiretapping Wendy. And my guess is that she was just so careful with that sort of stuff, whereas Charlie and Donna weren't. And it's kind of ironic in a sense, you know, we can make the joke about Wendy being the weakest link. Georgia, during the trial, called her the weakling in the family that Charlie protected and looked after and tried to sort out all her problems. But really, when you think about it, is it them that were the weakest links? And somehow Wendy managed to manipulate them into this. And she is the strongest link here. She was the most careful. There's no smoking gun that we know of. And from the information we know about, there is a chance she's going to get away with it.
Not many of the friends did that. People were like Team Danny or Team Wendy. I tried to straddle both. I was probably the only person who was able to straddle both. And it would break my heart. Which is actually already broken, so I guess I can't fall too much further. He was going to give a presentation at Rutgers. He was supposed to fly in last night to New York, so they're having a memorial for him there. And,
you know, could it be the case? I mean, obviously, it's over for Donna, Charlie, and pretty much over for Harvey, I would suspect, right? His life is destroyed, right, without Donna, clearly. The empire is in tatters, but is Wendy gonna be the beneficiary of what's left of this empire? You would think it was a hell of a price to pay, but if you are a sociopath, then who cares? Tamara is awesome, Jamie. Yeah.
I'm so full of memories, I'm just in utter disbelief. I'm almost positive at some point we discussed him having a will. I don't know when in this time frame it was at all. But I feel like he has one. No idea where. He was willing to pacify Wendy for a long time. He wanted to get back together with her. He offered, I'll change, we'll get back together, and the important things of the family. She wouldn't have it. And so every time, it was the type of thing where if he was going to have an extended period of time away, he would give her right of first refusal. She never returned the favor. If it was only for a little night, and she's like, okay, well, do it, you know, and she would generally not accept but she absolutely would never return the favor, even if it meant people coming from South Florida to come and watch the kids. That really bothered him. But the dance that they did was very painful to everyone around them, because it was just nasty. And even on days when she had them, he would go to the preschool so just so he could see them and spend time with them. He referred to himself as Abba in Jewish tradition, and he really wanted them to be raised Orthodox. And this was a huge bone of contention between the two of them. They agreed on it when they got married. And then over time, she made it fairly clear that she was not into that. So for the first year after the kids were born, first year or two, they did the ritual, they sang songs, they were teaching them the songs, everything seemed good. And then she just didn't want to go to temple with him and sort of declined. And then they were actively fighting post-divorce as to what the upbringing would be. And she didn't want them growing up in some kind of Orthodox way. Absolutely not. And she knew that was his heart. So there was never going to be peace about that. Everyone knows, and I've heard people in town write me when I haven't even commented to them, saying, I just heard this is domestic. Have you heard anything? And I'm like, I'm not discussing this. But it's, Wendy has all clear. She can move wherever she wants, all that kind of stuff. I don't think she would hurt her children that way. I want to believe that. I could see her getting overwhelmed enough with the situation to complain to someone who would want to make it go away. And I also feel it's weird that her social worker boyfriend, poof, so suddenly after just bragging about him so recently.
When was that? When was the latest time that she was talking about you?
Okay, let me figure out when I guest lectured.
This is Jeff.
I had dinner with Danny on the 4th. I guest lectured on June 17th.
That's the one that you wanted to refer to later, that you were asking me to remind you about?
Yes, so she was bragging about him. She really liked him, and she sent me messages. My messages are going so far back at this point. Let me pull it up.
When you're guest lecturing, she's not there.
We talked before.
Okay.
There's Danny's message. Sorry, it's not here on the 17th. There it is.
Well, this is you. What time is the class in the morning? And then after that, you said 10 to 12:30 or earlier. The blue is you.
Yes, the blue is me.
Okay. And then June 17th at 8:50 a.m. 10, please. I have to run today after class, but can we set up a date so I can thank you and take you to lunch, please? You said, sounds good. This is all referring to the class that day. Sometime after the class at 1:47, she says, you are brilliant and beautiful and amazing. Many thanks for teaching class today. And then you said, let's do a double date. I'm sorry, she said, let's do a double date. Yeah.
Okay, so she said, let's do a double date. I didn't respond to that because that felt weird to me.
Right. But she's referring to the social worker?
The social worker boyfriend.
Do you know his name?
They were Facebook friends. I don't know if they still are. She had his picture up. They've been dating since September, she told me. Dan knew about him. He mentioned him to me when we went to dinner the week before, or a couple weeks before. And his take was kind of like, well, if she's happy, why isn't she just, getting on with her life? He apparently went poof shortly thereafter. That's less than a month.
Wendy never spoke to Jeff again face to face, ever. Jeff reached out the day after the murder, saying that he was shocked at what had happened, but he'd always be here if she needed someone to speak to, and she never replied.
I guess my question to that would be, he's a social worker. If he wasn't,
And as Jeff said, he knew that she was speaking to other friends. It's not like she was incapable of communication, devastated, right?
inclined to do something on her behalf, did he just find her to be getting too out of control to be
Jeff
there?
was the
I don't know.
patsy.
Unless it was her decision. But
She say he was a
professor of social work.
professor. Okay, so
He's licensed.
FSU or
Yes, FSU, College of Social Work professor. He looked a little bit like Danny, I suppose, looked when he was younger.
you met him.
I did not meet him.
You saw his picture.
I saw his picture. Mm-hmm. And
Is this the only guy in her life?
So, good question. When Danny and I were at Thai food that night for my birthday, Ken Lawson, who's the secretary of DBPR, he happened to be there and he said hello, and Dan said hello, and I'm fairly certain that Ken and Wendy dated right around the divorce or around the time she left or something around there. But that was just in passing. She's been very close to the vest. And I didn't know she was dating anyone. I mean, I heard from Danny, but then I didn't know from her that that was the case. And I don't think he knew from her. I think he knew from other people telling him.
Yeah, the 3 cents is saying, after testifying, did Wendy immediately leave the court, or did she stay and enjoy Jeff's testimony? We know that she wouldn't have done. But we do have images of Wendy in court. I can't recall which actual trial this is, but there she is. I think that may be one of the earlier trials. We can safely assume that this is not Jeff's testimony that she's sitting watching. Oh, hey, kindness cake. Tamara. So Tamara was one of Dan's best friends and one of his longest friends, and she had become a good friend of Wendy also, and she found herself caught in the middle of the friendship. She was very present and around in the period leading up to the murder, and she went to visit Wendy. I think the day after the murder, I think the day of this, either the day here of this interview or the same day as the murder, I'm not too sure. But this interview is so revealing in terms of her suspicions regarding the Adelson family and Wendy herself, and she corroborates so much of what Jeff said in his interviews and in court, and corroborates so many of the red flags that we are aware of. And I'm praying that she testifies in some of the future trials.
So that was kind of odd. And even if they had just broken up and things were good, like I would still be over helping to comfort her yesterday. You know, that's a big deal, especially with a social work background. Like, Janine, according to her husband, I guess, he wasn't there, but Janine was with Wendy when she found that one. Janine's like, I went to the police station with her, but it felt very, I was like, is she an attorney? Is she representing her? It felt very guarded, very, very guarded. like, you like her personal bodyguard now, and almost like guarded with the children around me. And I'm like, that's really weird. You know, her, again, Wendy's mom seemed fine. Anyone else, I can't say.
You don't suspect anything suspicious about her mom.
Not so much, no.
But her dad, you're feeling some vibes because of him not wanting to look you in the eye
Just
yesterday.
And then today not wanting to look me at all. No.
Did he acknowledge you at all today?
No, he didn't. Not at all.
It was the same day of this interview. She went round.
And he and his son had a dental practice. He was well respected in the community down in South Florida. Shows a lot of resources, and I'm sure that if anything were to take place, they would be extremely smart about it. But I got a vibe from him like, I know you suspect me, and I'm done.
Okay.
I don't know.
You said that woman that was over there was Janine?
Janine? Mm-hmm.
You know her last name or anything?
Nope. Supposedly she was with Wendy when Wendy was being interrogated. Or at the police station with Wendy at the time she was being questioned.
Okay.
And then Janine's husband. But she was protective in a way that felt a little overprotective.
That was the first time you met her?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Never heard of her before?
mm-mm.
What do you know about her two brothers? I know there's two brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard about this Charlie, and he's a periodontist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Had worked with her dad, and that's in South Florida. And then her older brother, whose name is escaping me right now, I believe was in New York.
Robert.
Doctor, married to an Indian descent woman.
So Robert Adelson is the older brother who was already by this point estranged from the family. He had big problems with the family, with Donna and Harvey, because of the way that they had apparently treated him through his marriage. I don't think they were happy with his marriage. And he essentially cut them off, and at the time of this interview was living up in New York. And he still is. He's even more so estranged from them. I think the aftermath of this murder was obviously too much for him. I believe he's given interviews, actually. There's interviews out there of him. I've not heard them yet, but I would be interested to hear them at some point.
Named Haritha. And protective of her, but very kind of separated and involved with his own life and his family. Charlie was the one who was closer.
Charlie's older than her as well?
Charlie's the younger one.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait, no. I guess Wendy is the youngest. It's just that Charlie's younger than I am, too,
Okay.
so. But I was down there in their house. I was trying to help her learn how to breastfeed with Danny there and the brother. And when they split up, I went down and met with Wendy and went out with Wendy and Charlie and his friends. It's mind-blowing, but the legal situation was getting to another point where it was blowing up.
He somehow found out that she withheld financial disclosure
Yes,
and was going to use that
yes.
for what purpose?
It was to discredit her and have things adjusted, I believe, including getting back his heirloom.
Okay, he told you this.
Yes.
Okay, and he told you the figure of
$500,000 is what he
Danny
said.
told you that directly?
Yes.
So in other words, when they were going through their divorce proceedings and they each had to file disclosure statements,
Correct.
she shorted it by $500,000.
He said she fraudulently did it, yes.
And he didn't bring it up then.
And obviously, it goes without saying, if this was successful, if Dan's motion was successful in these regards, it was also likely to cause Wendy to lose her license, her job, and the repercussions of that are obvious, right?
Or he didn't know about it then?
He didn't know about it then.
But he's discovered it since?
Yes.
And so...
And he talked about it even before we went to dinner on my birthday.
Did he talk about it to anybody else that you know of?
I'm sure he talked about it to Alex and Maya. Now, he also talks about stuff, I'm sure, to his parents, because when I met Ruth, Ruth was trying to talk to Donna Adelson, Wendy's mom, and saying, like, oh, I'd really like to see.
And according to the police report, the other friends that Tamara is mentioning did actually know about this legal bomb, and they stated that Wendy also knew that it was coming.
Boys. And, like, Donna just kept walking away.
Who was saying that?
Ruth.
Right.
Said to Wendy's mom, Donna. Today at the service. I'd really like to see the boys. And Donna kept walking away with the boys. And Ruth turned to me and she said, I hope what I just saw didn't actually happen. Like, she just got ignored.
Oh.
And she said that, she's like, well, I guess that's not going to happen, but you know the story. So, obviously, I infer that Dan had been talking to her and the family about these problems. It was a big family-to-family, but Danny talked to him about everything. Like they were like brother and sister to him while he was here.
Okay.
And he needed that kind of rock. He was a mess with what Wendy put him through. And I'll tell you that Maya, on some level, suspects that Wendy's family might be involved. Alex is really trying not to think that way.
Hey, Catherine.
Let me pull up Dan's messages. Let me see if there's the list of attorneys. That's what I wanted to go through. He says, I hope you're not using Wendy's lawyer. Said, who does she have? Currently, Kristen Adamson. Sorry, Kristen Adamson. I'll just let you see it.
This was her attorney. That's what she's talking about. Before was Shannon Novi.
This is Danny writing to me.
Okay.
Because I was in the process of trying to find an attorney, which I didn't end up using with my ex.
Okay.
But the way that this went was every so often, each of them would change lawyers. And what that would do was conflict out the attorney for the other person.
Not sure how that works, but okay. You're the law grad.
Basically, if they've ever talked to you about your case,
right.
You can't represent the other person.
Okay.
So they went around and get consultations and had each person for a little while. If they didn't like how the attorney was handling it, they'd attorney shop.
And the other one couldn't use the one they just got through with.
And there are only a certain number of family certified attorneys in town.
Huh.
It got ugly. I mean, it was a long list of, and he was actively filing motions to conflict out people she was selecting as of when we went to dinner on June 4th.
So it sounds like they're both trying to eliminate all the possible attorneys that the other side can have.
Correct. It was honestly, it was just...
This was ugly.
Ugly.
Okay.
And for a while, it became ugly in a really, like a Cold War sort of way. And then...
I swear, I didn't know she was going to say that.
In the last month and a half, it had started heating up again. Originally, she had asked me, I did the guest lecture June 17th. Originally, she'd sent me an email asking me to guest lecture on June 3rd, which was my birthday, so I remember it. Because she wanted me to guest lecture on the dates she and Danny were supposed to go into court. And then that got moved So they were going back and forth that whole time.
Up until this past June?
This was this June.
Yeah, I know. I'm
Yeah.
saying, what were they going to go to court for on June 3rd?
They were going to court again for this. He was trying to raise those issues, those particular issues.
Had he notified, had he already filed this motion? Had he already?
I don't know.
Okay.
I know that they were going to court, and then he wanted to adjust it to add certain things on
Okay.
for conflict and for this failure to disclose
Okay.
aspect.
And she was notified of that?
I assume so. And she, when she used to trust me and talk to me about her legal stuff, and then she felt like I was getting too close to Danny, she, her parents were goading her on, like, you need to go to the mattresses, you need to get, and they wanted to be done with him and really stick it to him. There was a mentality when she would talk to me and when I was present with them when they would talk, that he owed her.
Okay.
And he owed her big time, which they weren't married a whole lot of years, but there was this, he owes you. That was, and I don't know whether it was because she had told them she felt she had been abused or what, but that was incredibly present. And the people that she talked to on Team Wendy had heard.
It never fails to blow my mind just how many times Donna referred to acting in a performance in her communication with Wendy. In the emails. This was all in reference to the battles regarding relocation. But do not forget that there was an attempt by Charlie to arrange the hit on Dan in 2013, this same year here.
Stories that Danny was very upset about, and he spent time trying to change that. So it got personal, it got professional, it was unpleasant.
Did Danny ever concede that he owed her more money?
No, he felt like he owed her less money. I mean, he would do anything for the boys. He would give everything for the boys. But in terms of her taking something that she wasn't owed, he was not.
No, I know, but I'd heard something before about that there was some contention in this divorce that he had not paid for everything.
And that was the case, I think, earlier on, to my knowledge.
She's very
I don't know if it was equity of the house or...
Yeah, they disagreed on house. Yeah, that sounds right. They disagreed on that. They disagreed on the jewelry, the heirloom. And then in going through this process, it was the concealment of the $500,000 in assets. And I didn't understand the details of what that entailed, if that was like inheritance money. I think she thought it was inheritance money that he wasn't entitled to. But it was a back and forth of, you just didn't do this, you didn't disclose that, you should have done this, and it was, she felt trapped. I know she felt trapped here. And I know that he, especially now dating someone in New York, was like, he wanted things to move on. I mean, even before he started dating Amy, when he was talking to me, he wanted to move on.
Tallahassee, I think a lot of Tallahassee, this is my home, but yeah. I know a lot of people are of the opinion, well, Tallahassee's not Miami, it's not Orlando, it's definitely not New York, it's not Boston. So a guy, I mean, I just wondered, I've never quite understood why they landed here from everything I've heard.
So he wanted to be a full-time professor, and he had some friends here who lived here before me and had talked to them as well. And so FSU became the option. And they had lived in DC together before they came down here, and seemed to have a nice romance, seemed like a nice couple, and They moved here and she was miserable here. They moved here and she was miserable here. Even before the wedding. And he wanted to set up roots. He wanted to have a kind of a, he's Canadian of all things, but he wanted like a Burby family, go to shul, and he could establish himself. And this provided enough of a small town feel that he's like, I'm going to throw myself into it. And he was happy to do that. He wanted the house. When they got the house together, he wanted to do it all up, and he was excited about that. And she went along, but I knew she wasn't excited about it.
Well, why Tallahassee as opposed to someplace down in South Florida where she's from?
That's not a place where he could get a professorship immediately.
Okay.
It's bigger competition.
Okay.
And I don't think he was as keen on Miami. In fact, after she left him, he's like, I'll even move down to Miami with you, kind of thing. Showed him. But I was too late at that point. But he didn't want to go down to Miami. She always felt they would end up in Miami. I think they lived in Miami. Yeah, they did. They lived in Miami she lived in Miami while she was finishing school for a year. So they were down in Miami for a little bit together. I actually went and visited them in Miami.
Oh, they were married?
I don't even think they were married yet. I'm not sure. It was either just before or shortly after they got married that they were down in Miami. When I was still married and I lived in Brandon, they came when they were engaged and stayed at my house for a couple of nights. So
Wendy and Dan moved down to Miami for a year in 2006. I think he got a job at Miami uni or in some law school in Miami, but didn't keep it, so they moved back. They moved up to Tallahassee. So 2006. Same year that they were married.
her life was South Florida. She grew up there, wanted to be back there, especially when the kids came. She wanted to be close to her parents. It was a little overwhelming for her, especially with two boys. And he was, hey, we're here, and let's go in the community and really become a part of it. And so he was trying to help her.
Yeah, I noticed that, Jamie. Donna saying to Wendy, we can't do anything without your help. Yeah.
Get a teaching position at FSU. And so she started as an adjunct, and she was teaching the medical, legal, clinical. Marshall Kapp, she was the person she reported.
There's enough in the email communication of how overbearing Donna was in regards to Wendy, and how much she was attempting to persuade her of options. It just makes it almost impossible to believe that they would choose to have the father of her kids murdered without her say so, right? I know I've said this, it's an obvious thing to say, but it's just another indicator on such a long list of circumstantial evidence in regards to Wendy's probable guilt.
He was at the service today, and she started bringing me in to guest lecture, and I've done it every semester for the last 3 years, including her summers. So I always have touched base with her, but it's once a semester, once every 3 or 4 months, and Danny is, at least every month I'm hanging out with him at some point.
Okay. All right. So basically, from our conversation,
I don't feel good about her dad.
right. Anybody else in the family besides him?
I haven't seen Charlie in a really long time, but I know that she was relying heavily on Charlie, and if she was telling anyone about what happened or what she felt happened, it would have been Charlie.
Okay.
And that he was very protective of her.
Sure, Suzanne, yeah.
Danny felt like he was okay with Charlie at the beginning, and then over time he felt like he wasn't anymore. And I think the same thing. He felt like he was fine with her parents, and then all of a sudden they flipped on him. He was very confused about it. And I think over time, when he was hearing some of the things that she had passed along to colleagues, who then started looking at him funny, he realized that her family members may be thinking the same things. And I don't know exactly what she was telling them, but he was painted as not a nice person.
Okay.
So it became very he said, she said. Now, I do believe they both love those children to death. But I've never seen a father so devoted. And she became very happy to travel. And she'd be gone for just periods at a time and leave the boys. I don't know who she left them with, if her parents came up or what, but she would just leave. And it really bothered him too, because when she did that, sometimes he wouldn't get the boys, or it was like a day off, and so she's like, oh, well, they'll just stay with this person this time. And so there were little takes where she kept trying to cut into his time schedule. But they had a little bit of a groove for a while, where it seemed like it was going okay. And then just in the last few months, it has felt like a renewed flurry of legal activity. And she seemed happy and excited about the social worker boyfriend. And Dan thought maybe she would calm down and be happy and start her own path. And he had recently gone up to visit her. So after we went to dinner, he was leaving to go visit her. And they had this pattern where they switch off every couple of weeks.
Unfortunately, Suzanne, because I'm in the UK, outside the US, that link is denied for me. So I can't see it, but I'm sure some of you guys can click on that and check that.
Mostly he would fly up because she had some flying issues and was a little bit timid about flying. So he would go up, and she was scheduled to come down and meet the boys in person for the first time, which recently just happened. So he was all excited about that, and she had started Skyping with the boys. My understanding was that Wendy had found out that she was Skyping with the boys and was furious about it. And this is very recently.
I didn't know that.
So Amy had started coming more into the boys' lives, and I don't think she was handling it well from what I've heard. No, I don't.
She was Skyping from here. Danny was having the boys on Skype here while he had them.
I don't know. I think he may have tried to put her on while he was with her.
Oh.
While the boys were with Wendy. That's my understanding.
Oh, okay.
Which upset her.
Okay.
Which would make more sense if she were present. When I walked into Wendy's yesterday, and I'm assessing the situation, and Janine was there, and they went into a private conversation, and I'm sitting down, and they're like, well, does Amy, we'd have to talk to Amy, and da-da-da. And I said, I talked to Amy. And I said, does she know? They said, yeah, she knows. I'm like, no, not what happened.
Hey, Lisa.
Does she know? As if, does she know where the investigators are looking, was the implication. And I said, what do you mean? And the next question was Wendy redirected, and she said, has she talked to her husband? And so she started down this path with Janine there of making me wonder, or wanting to make me wonder if Amy's husband was involved.
Wow.
I still didn't feel led that way, even with that discussion change. But that was the path. Wendy is good at keeping things close to the vest and redirecting. And for example, she and I were pretty close while she was writing that book. She didn't tell me she was writing the book at all. And then when she finally told me, she gave me a copy, and it was like, oh, author lives in Tallahassee with her 2 sons.
Now, was this a book about?
I said this last time, but isn't it so chilling that she has the character, or the publishers have the character on the cover with the exaggerated blue eyes? She wrote this in 2011, 3 years before the murder, a year before she separated with Dan. One of the first things that she said in her interview on the day Dan was murdered was how the guy in ABC Liquors complimented her about her very blue eyes. I mean, wow. Number one, it's incredibly weird that you would even remember to mention that as your after you've just been told that your ex has been shot to death, essentially. But then to see this cover is then you've got the thing with the owl on her shirt, and the fact that one of the hitmen, Tuto's nickname, Tuto, is Latin for owl, and he posted a picture on Instagram or somewhere of an owl on the day of the murder. The fact that she purchased Bullet Rye whiskey, bourbon. Are they all coincidences?
A single woman raising 2 children?
Yeah. This is our story. It was a fictionalized version of human trafficking based on her clinical work.
Okay.
And it's apparently hit. It was selected at FSU to be it was like their one book or something campus. So everyone who joined, every new freshman gets a copy of her book. I was told that up at UNC, or
Yeah, don't worry, Suzanne. I think Wendy's blue eyes were fake. I think that was contact lenses, I assume, from what was said in the interview with cops. Everything about her's fake. Everything.
up at Duke. There's a copy of her book in the law library up at Duke. She was one of the few people that she self-published.
Lisa, I'd recommend checking out the live I did called 7 Deadly Scoundrels, an introduction if you're wanting to gen up on this case. And then if you dive into the one with the title Sarah Boone stroke Adelsons, I think that's a pretty good summary of actually no, if you go into the live called Is Wendy Adelson a Sociopath, that's the 2 best ones I'd say to gen up on the case.
And then after she self-published, because she was so good at publicizing it, people came back and wanted to formally publish it for her, which is rare. And Deanna was all like supportive about everything and all this kind of stuff. And it's still, honestly, when I looked at that, I'm like, It was one of the things I noted, but I put in the back of my mind with every other little weird thing. And then when she left him, I was like, oh, she knew this was coming. But she when she finished it was like a whole year before.
Hey, Sarah. Good. Yes, I'm with her now. Well, she was going to help them look for that, but that's just not that I know of. Well, actually, we're just about done here, and she can go back by the house if that's what she wants to.
Yes, please.
So they were what? Okay. All right. I'll let her know. Bye. Apparently, it sounds like they're having some type of difficulty finding this will or possibility of a will, or I don't know if they even know for sure.
I just know that at some point we talked about him having one. I don't know where in the timeline it is at all.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so she wrote this book. It's going to come out this fall.
No, it came out.
Okay.
I don't remember when it came out. I can probably go through notes and figure out. But the timeline for when she left him, she had published it many months before she left, and that's how she put it in the book.
Okay.
So she had been planning it for a long time.
Because there was no acknowledgement of him as her husband.
Acknowledgement of him.
Even though they were still married at the
Correct.
time. Okay, and they were still living together at that time?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And she told me later that, she had been thinking about it for a long time, but she had really been thinking about it for a long time. Like, it was a deftly executed plan of, he's gone this weekend, everything out. And the book.
Isn't it the understatement to say that Wendy keeps her cards close to her chest, right?
Having been written so far in advance, was just strange to not include him when he also teaches there, and they were living in the same house and supposedly happily married. So I tried to think maybe that does give some credence to her really wanting to get out because of certain reasons. But Danny can be crass, and I can see how he can come across as condescending. He was just a typical condescending Harvard nerdy type person when I first met him. Like, bow tie wearing, and he would rub people the wrong way because he was very, very highfalutin, used big words. He was very confident in his intelligence, but it came across as arrogant.
Okay.
He came across as...
Yeah, and this is what I was alluding to at the beginning, in the view of trying to be objective here. I think it's probably undeniable that Dan was not liked by a good portion of people. Jeff himself just related almost exactly what Tamara just said, that he was very condescending to him, very arrogant, put him down, looked down upon him for the position that he held. And I'm saying this only to be objective, right? Because you either want to know the truth about a case and why a case occurred, or you don't. But we also have to acknowledge how much Jeff's own perception would have been skewed through Wendy. That's obvious, but it doesn't change certain observations that I think are obvious.
arrogant to many people. Over time, he mellowed, especially after Wendy and especially with the boys. He mellowed. He's like, okay, everything doesn't have to be so...
Okay, Suzanne, you have green eyes. Green eyes are cool. Jamie says sociopaths hide everything behind their mask. Their intentions are secret because they are all self-serving. Indeed. Even if Wendy isn't involved in this, I still think she's a sociopath. But she was involved.
Put in place, and nothing's so perfect, and he just matured. And you know, he went to wearing sandals every day and kind of like slobbing it around. I'm like, oh, this is interesting, this phase. But he just became more comfortable in his own skin and in Tallahassee, and he, especially hearing it now, like he was able to make a lot of friends. If he rubbed people the wrong way or he seemed arrogant, people were eventually won over by his kind of, you know, self-deprecating at times, but wise, silly sarcasm. And he was very silly. In his professional life, so he started Prof's blog. He was doing this website called Prof's blog. He was very active. He had gathered academics from across the United States, and they were all working on this blog that he had, but he was the main person doing it, and it really took off. I mean, I think it was ranked on some list in the last year, like fairly high.
Was this for law professors?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Spelled PRAWFS blog, Prof's blog. And he was happy. I mean, he thought he was happy with Wendy, and then after he left, he was miserable. After she left, he was miserable, and then he was finally getting back. He was getting back, and I think all he wanted is for his children to grow up in that legacy. And all of his close friends know that at the first chance she gets, she'll be in South Florida. There will not be any Jewish upbringing. His friends are freaking out about this right now. And that pretty much any wish that he had for them would be just completely out the door. But they were having a very difficult time balancing their wishes.
Doing what?
Balancing their wishes.
Okay.
Because they were so opposite each other.
Right.
It was the type of thing where the sentiment was, it would not end.
Okay.
And for Wendy to have acted on multiple occasions, including the time she left, in a very long-term, very secretive planning mode, and then a very almost shockingly sudden execution, it just makes me wonder. And I don't know if that's a family trait, but I know that everyone, family, friends, everyone was tired.
Dan's blog still exists, guys. That's the link there. There is still people posting there on that blog for anyone that wants to check that out.
Tired of having different teams, tired of this legal back and forth. And if people felt it wasn't going to end, I could see them wanting to make it end.
Okay. And like you said, this opens up all of her options as to where she goes from here.
Yeah. And I care about her, and I've been friends with her, but it's through Danny that I first met her, and I've been friends with him for a decade before that. And it was because of her that my loyalty was, I can't date you right now either. So it's Like, I've tried to respect that. I've tried to respect where everyone is. But I'm already devastated. I'm kind of in a numb zone right now. But he was my confidant. He was my advisor. He was someone who I could trust. And that, for me, was very rare. So, I don't know what I'm going to be doing without him here. Maybe get out of Tallahassee.
Yeah, this
Worried
gets
for your own
powerful.
safety?
I was worried, like, if someone is so rational that they would do something like this, or put out a hit, or plan this, or whatever like this, or put out a hit, or plan this, or whatever like this, or put out a hit, or plan this, or whatever, and they feel like someone's really suspicious about it, that person, why not? You know? If there's some kind of chink in the plan, there's... And I know Ruth is trying so hard to be gracious because she wants that relationship with those boys. But it would break Danny's heart if it turns out the way that it's seemingly going to now. Where they're in Canada, she'll never let them go see. There's no grandparent rights, right, in Florida?
Grandparent rights in Florida apparently are the most restrictive, it seems, in the US. I'm just going to read out something here, literally from Wikipedia. There was an act that came into force literally because of this case and because of Wendy cutting off contact with the grandparents, Ruth and forget the grandfather's name. Phil. Ruth and Phil are Dan's parents. Following the 2016 arrest, Wendy cut off contact entirely to them. She also took the step of changing her son's last names from Markel to Adelson. We know that. Claiming it was for safety. As I say, the visitation laws are among the most restrictive in the nation, leaving the Markels with no way to even petition a court for a ruling on whether they could be granted contact with their grandsons. The Florida legislature considered a bill in 2020 that would create an additional set of conditions in which grandparents would be granted standing to access courts. Wendy's attorney denounced the bill as an absolute outrage. In 2022, the legislation, informally known as the Markel Act, passed both chambers of the Florida legislature and was signed into law by Governor Ron DeSantis. Isn't that crazy?
They'll never be raised in that. And I guess that's her right, if there's nothing to do with this. But I pray that there's nothing, she and her family had nothing to do with that, because those boys need everyone. But there are so many good reasons for him not to be around. And I'm just angry thinking about it. Just even possibility, I'm furious about it. And when I grieve, it takes me years to actually get angry, so for me to get angry like on day one was very unusual. And if they'd had nothing to do with it, she put him through hell for the last year and a half. And everyone knows that. So there are different people, but I didn't even want to call her. I also found it strange that she didn't call me. She knew how close I was to him. I just guest lectured for her. She and I are friends. She didn't reach out to me, contact me, anything. I didn't even want to look at her Facebook page or call her. I'm like, she didn't reach out. This is just weird. And that's why I just showed up.
Oh, you talking about today?
Yesterday.
Yesterday? Oh, at the house.
Mm-hmm.
Then you showed up unannounced.
Correct.
Yeah. So she's saying I'm sorry when she greeted you, you're associating that with I'm sorry I didn't call you. I'm sorry I didn't notify you.
No. That was an I'm sorry for your loss, because
Oh.
she knew how close I was to him. No, I found it strange that in the period where she learned something had happened to him.
Yes, indeed, Jamie. Her son's last name is now associated with a family hitman plot. Dumb move, Wendy. The Markel name is far more respected. How true.
And didn't know he had died because apparently that hadn't happened yet. She didn't call me. Nothing. She knows I'm his oldest and closest friend here. Didn't call. Nothing. Like, that just didn't feel right either. At some point, whether waiting, being questioned, worrying, something, it would have made complete logical sense, just seeing her a couple weeks ago, that she would have contacted me.
Gotcha.
She knows.
So, I don't know. So,
I know they're waiting for you up there.
what
I
can
think-
you tell me now?
Well, I want to, I know that they were telling you about the injuries that he sustained. They were not that severe. I mean, it caused death, but it was not that. It's severe and as traumatic as what they were portraying. But that's not unusual for that to occur. I know that there was different theories and people thought there was some type of maniac running loose in the neighborhood. It appears that however this occurred, that he was targeted directly. I don't see anything that indicates someone was in the process of doing another crime and he interrupted them or anything like that. So basically what you pretty much already have it, is that unless there's a case of mistaken identity, and I know that there's some other people at the law school with the same last name, that it looks like someone came after Danny personally. As to why or what the motivation, that's still open. But I'm thinking anybody that would do something like this would probably know the right person. It wouldn't be a case of mistaken identity. It's possible, especially when you have 2 or 3 professors down there with the same pronunciation and similar spelling of the name. Now, as far as this thing he was consulting on, I understand that's just been within the past couple weeks. The case that's up north is still going on, and he seems so far removed from that.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
And in addition, he was consulting for the defense. It's not like he was consulting for some type of expert witness for the prosecution.
And he was all about justice and being fair to defendants, especially. That was his work. That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Was it at the door or was it in his car?
His car.
Okay. That was what I had heard on a more personal level. There is a huge mistaken sense that he was on the phone, answered the door, and was shot in the face.
I know that's out there, and I'm not going to correct that,
I understand.
and I don't want you to repeat that.
I won't.
Yeah, Dan was actually on the phone. He was parked in the garage in the car, and he was on the phone to a friend, and he said to the friend, there's some guy walking up the driveway, and then the friend heard muffled sounds, and then obviously didn't hear from Dan again. So he was shot while he was on the phone. Point blank range.
Oh.
And I know that that's why the whole neighborhood is all up in arms, because nobody's going to want to answer their door now.
It is, Jamie, yeah.
But when you go back to the home, more than likely you're going to understand, because that was the concern of the parents about blood in the house and so on and so forth. And I assured them that there wasn't. And then this morning, I explained to them why there wouldn't be blood in the house.
I had heard originally it was the driveway, and that's why when I drove past yesterday and just sat there, it also bothered me that I was like, shouldn't there be some sign of him? Shouldn't there be something?
It's inside the garage. You're going to understand. It's going to make more sense when you get back to the house.
Okay.
Because they're not going to, and I don't have a problem if they tell you. They may play dumb or they may act like, they're not supposed to tell you or whatever, but you can tell them that I've already talked to you and so forth.
And is it believed that it was a lie-in-wait situation?
I don't know about that. I don't know if it was a lie in wait or they followed him or...
Was it an open garage door?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this. So both my babysitter and a friend down the street, they all live in Benton, had their cars broken into over the last several months. It's always been in the evening, though.
Yeah, most of you guys know this, but he was followed that day. This is the hitman following him up at the Premier Fitness Club that Dan went to. And they followed him down to Trescott Drive. The car was caught on camera 3 or 4 times. Which incidentally looked very similar to Jeff Lacasse's car. This was the model of his car at the time. I presume it was about roughly the same color. This is a photo taken on the morning of the murder. See the crime scene tape. That's where he was parked in the garage there. And it took one of his neighbors, James Geiger, this guy here, who I think heard the shot, saw the silver Toyota leaving, and then came up, seen Dan, and called 911. This was the view from his window. You see the roadblock up there with the crime scene tape.
It's always been for people who just happen to have not locked their door that day.
That's correct.
And no one's ever gotten hurt, to my knowledge. Doesn't fit that either.
No.
It would be an interesting thing if someone knew that was going on, because it was such a long period of time that it occurred, that someone might think, oh, this might be a good thing to imply. But again, that crossed my mind, like, still doesn't fit. So
No, I don't think it's related to anything like that. Those are crimes of opportunity. Somebody comes by, flips the door handles. Actually, I had a conversation with a couple of ladies at the memorial service, and they were asking about that stuff, and I told them, I said, 9 times out of 10, people aren't locking their doors. Even this day and age, it's in their front yard, it's in their driveway, they don't lock it.
is it believed that he saw it coming?
He may have, it's not clear yet, but
Yeah, this is quite powerful. She just wants to believe that he didn't suffer. She wants to know that.
he may have known that something was, he wouldn't have known until, it was basically, he wouldn't know until it was too late.
But it was instantaneous. He
Yeah,
lost consciousness instantly. He lost consciousness instantly.
Oh, absolutely.
So he probably didn't feel.
I don't believe he suffered.
Okay.
Well,
You don't have to go back to the house if you don't feel like it.
Oh, I want to.
Okay.
I want
Let me be right. I'll be right back. Okay.
Okay.
yep. The reality of murder.
Oh, God.
Wow. So that's the interview with Tamaro Demco, which is insightful and powerful. And I think it was a good idea to watch that before going on to the further testimony of Wendy and Jeff, because it gives such good context. And just as a summary of Tamara's interview. There are so many good reasons for Dan not to be around. She put him through hell for the last year and a half. Really strange. She never contacted me. I just covered a class for her a couple of weeks ago. I don't think any of the Adelsons would be the ones to pull the trigger. They would be smart. Not smart enough in the end, although Wendy may well have been. Wendy is very good at keeping this close to the chest and redirecting. A lot of interesting timings that don't seem right. Incredibly intentional. Seems like someone knew his routine. Alright guys, so I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks as always guys for taking part. Appreciate it. And I shall see you guys next time when we'll have a look at the testimony from the second trial, which is the retrial of Katie McBanowa. And the testimony this time from both Wendy and Jeff is a bit more in depth. It's longer, and you're going to find it interesting. And there's still so much to go through on this case. I've not even really got to the bump and everything that happened between Donna, Charlie, and Katie in regards to the bump and all the information that was leaked out from the wiretaps regarding that. And I'll be wanting to go into Katie's testimony, which is fascinating. And we'll get into some of Charlie's testimony and his cross-examination as well, which is really interesting. So, all that to come. Alright guys, good night, and I shall see you guys soon for sure.